Okay, back to Godot. I wanted to be able to put a background on this, so I added a HUD level and then put the game under that. It turns out that if you want to have a background, and it's got to be drawn first, and to have that, you have to have your objects on top of that, because everything pretty much worked fine except for the the line drawn from the ship to the emitter. That was not showing up because the game draws that, and so it's at the lowest level. So I needed something to be able to put. So if I put a sprite under the game, or a node under the game, something to draw the background, it just covered up whatever the game was doing. So I added the HUD, color rectangle, and I can change that here. And I might as well just show you where the game is right now, and then I'll cover what I did. So here's the game. Now you'll see it still tracks. I can fire the emitter, and while it's firing, the ship does not move. The ship moves, and now, after so many seconds, the enemies will start to swarm. I'm going to probably do this on a level-by-level basis. And I added some debugging stuff. The lines from the player to the enemy, and then whether or not they're swarming. Because I couldn't tell if it was actually triggering it, so. Anyway, I also reduced the starting health so it ends quick, so I could test to see if I could turn off the enemy and make sure you can't fire once it's gone. So that's working nice. Of course, I don't have a restart, so I'll just have to restart it to show. I also added levels. If you look at the emitter, you'll also see a particle. You see off to the side here. I added a particle to that, so that was one of the things I wanted to do. Oop, swarming. This is really not going to make it a little tougher. Ah. And so you can see, go to level to level. And it should, boop, there we go. And so I'll have to trigger that. But anyway, let's see. Like I said, I added those testing things. So in the game itself, I added a value that I export right here. I also export the level and the health, stuff like that, so I can feed that back to the HUD. Let's see. I moved the creating of the border with the static objects. I moved those to their own thing called init game, because I realized, I'm going to have multiple levels. I don't have to redraw that. Those can stay there. So those shouldn't ever go away. And so I also added, the timer stop and start for the swarming. Except I don't have the turning off the swarming yet part. So because once it starts swarming, they keep swarming. So I did that because after a while they just wouldn't, they'd just slow down, and if you just wait them out, you could then just pick them off real easy. I cut back the amount of time the emitter goes to about 1/4 of a second, so you can fire faster, which as on each level I'm going through, and when we start the level, enemy count is basically level times 5, so it starts off at 5, 10, 15, 20. 25, and you get up there, there'll be a lot of enemies on the screen, so I don't plan to have a top limit. So the whole idea behind this game is just to try to survive. Okay, so the emitter, what I did with that was I added, let me bring up the emitter scene. Here's the emitter scene. I added a particle 2D object, and then I once I was using this texture as a holder for the sprite for here, but then I removed that sprite and just used a collision shape because I realized it kind of looked kind of bad with that sprite. But that sprite, let me see if I can go to the assets. And if we, yeah, this is what I used for it. I tried to make a new one, but it looked too much like little coins coming out of it and spinning around and stuff. So I said that's not cool. So over here, we can see this is the emitter, and if we zoom in a bit, you can see that you can make out those shapes now. But when it's small, you scale it down, they look like sparkling things. So that was what I was going for. You add a particle 2D, just regular node. And I'll get into actually doing some stuff with a particle thing a little later, so I'll get into that. So I don't think I had to add much code. Oh, I did add an alive value that I could, if it knows it's alive, then you can fire it. Otherwise, because I needed a way to shut it off. I'm thinking I probably should have made the emitter a child of the player, but I'm a little too far in now to go back and rewrite everything. Next game, I'll have to, keep that in mind. So, again, this should be health. That should be swarm. That's just a countdown. I want to know how much time was left, and that's basically all that's going to do. Here, the time left. So, laser. Oh, I just changed the width here, and then this true here signifies that it will become a anti-alias, or however you say that. Makes it look a little cooler, but. And then here's where with the testing, is where I actually draw the enemy target color, and I loop through all the enemies. And really, I just want this for testing. In a regular game, there won't be those lines. I just want to have a visual reference showing that the, to the player, to the enemy would, once I got the swarming working, I needed something that would give me an idea. Is it going in the right direction or not? So now to get the swarming to work, we have the countdown timer. I added a timer. That's just a countdown timer, and that turns on a well, actually, I loop. If it's swarming, I loop through all the I grab the player node, get the position of the player, then I loop through all the children on the screen. Where it's an enemy, I set the swarm to 1, which was 0, and now I set it to the target so that the swarm code in the enemy will know which direction to go. Because up until this point, it doesn't know where the player is. So in the enemy, I had to do the integrate forces. Now I had done some work with the integrate forces before when I tried to get the actual spaceship player to be a rigid body, and that caused problems with the examples they give you is this code here, which basically moves the position of the object, but it doesn't. You can't readily override the control of it. Anyway. Since I got my player code working the way I wanted to, I said, well, I'm not going to worry about that. But this is where you have to go in if I want to have the swarm. So when the swarm is greater than 0 and it's looping through this code, this is where I have the label text. I'll remove that later, but this is just for testing. I print the name of the enemies that are swarming. Then I give it a thrust vector. of 250, and then I took my code from the player and I reused that here, and all this does is it calculates the angle to point it at. So this should flip the enemy, well, rotate the enemy, or not the enemy, but rotate it thrust around the enemy, so it should be pointing at the player. And that's how I got that to work. But you have to use a set applied force. You really can't recommend it not to try to directly affect the rigid bodies and things that are based on physics. At one point I thought, well, what if I could just, there's I think, impact or something like that, where you can actually hit them, and I thought, well, if I have to, then I can figure out the exact opposite side and then smack them from that side with a static object or something. I don't know. But anyway, this seems to be working well enough and doing what I want it to do. So that took me a while. I'm getting used to these vectors and how they're using the vectors. Because you got XY. Well, is it XY? No, it's really for, because I'm not sure. Well, what is 250? Is that a Y coordinate? No. The vector 2D is really just for two-dimensional vector math. So it took me a while to get used to that, and then to get to the integrate forces and actually get that to fire up. So I said I'd do something on the particles. Now what I did is I just had to go through this and add, do my changes. I'm not going to touch this now since I got it working the way I want it to. But I have another when I was doing the other emitter, when I was doing the emitter and trying to do the particles, one of the particles looked like popcorn to me, so I saved that off, and I said, well, I can do that. So I have these this scene. It's just an empty scene, and I'll add a child node, and this will be a sprite, and then I'll drag this table off to this texture, and now I have a table. Cool. And now I want to do another one for the bowl. Move the bowl over here. Move the bowl up on top of the table. And now under this, which is the bowl, so we'll do that bowl. We'll just call this table, if I could spell. Now we add a child to this, and this is where we add our particle 2D. So okay, but it's not doing anything yet. Emitter's on. We have to give it a material. So this under here, process material. You have to add something to that. So I'm going to add, or you have to create a new one. So we'll do new particle material. And now we have particles coming out. Cool. Isn't that cool? Except I don't want those particles. I want my popcorn. So this create a thing like this. Let me see if I can bring it up. Yeah. Here's what it looks like. I got GIMP. And this is what it looks like blown up. But yeah, 1100%. So when you make it smaller, but what you want to get a different kind of shape is to make sure that it's transparent around the edges to get that irregular shape. Otherwise, you're just going to wind up with a block. And so go under texture, and this is where we'll add the popcorn right into texture. And now we have these, but that's a little big to be a popcorn. So this is where we go into the particle, and we'll scale it. And here, I think I'll 0.5. It's better. But it's all going down. Oh, it's just falling down. So, there's a ton of stuff here. And one of the things is the emission shape is everything's emitting from one single point. So, oops, I don't want to do that. So move that up a bit and change this point to a sphere. And then we'll change the radius to about 10. This is where you just have to start playing around with different sizes and stuff. And, I come in and spread 45. No, let's make it 90. See what that does. And then gravity. Gravity start. Yeah, we'll keep gravity. We're already starting to spread out popcorn. Orbit. This one could be interesting. This is what I used on the emitter to get some stuff. So if we change this to like 10, you see it's all, now we got a popcorn ball that's really flying. Let's add some linear acceleration, about 10. And change our orbit to more like 2. Still have 2, still too much, but anyway. We'll change that to 1. And radial acceleration, change that to 10. And basically what you want to do is just keep messing with stuff until you get what you want. Angular velocity, 20. Oops, not 209. Really didn't do much. Initial velocity. Let's make this 5. See what happens. Nothing. Let's make it 10. Still. Let's make it 20. And let's get rid of that orbital velocity entirely. And now we have popcorn falling out. But there's not much popcorn. And still, we'll go back up to here. And we'll change, this is the amount, these are the numbers of them. So we'll just bump this up to 15. And now we have a whole bunch of popcorn flying. Still, the popcorn's a little big for that bowl. So we'll have to change the scale of that. So we have to go back into material. Messing around with these particles, you'll be jumping back and forth a lot. So, let's see, scale. Let's make it 0.3. Yeah, there we go. Now we got popcorn falling. So you basically just keep messing with stuff. Now the color you can have, like, we'll do a color ramp, so we'll do next. And now we can go in here and get a new gradient. Then we go here, double click. Don't need a second one of those. Double click that. Start off with yellow because popcorn will be buttered. Start off a little dark. And of course somebody's calling. That's I recommend just playing around with the particles and just trying to figure out different things and see what you can do. You can. What's really interesting is, let's go back one and actually turn off gravity and see what happens. And turn off gravity. We'll just. If I had to do this, 0. There we go. Now the popcorn doesn't fall. And I'm going to, I think there's a lifetime. Let's go up a level. Time, yeah, lifetime. So you can bump this up and actually make them live a little longer. So now they're flying off into the. And then you can change your explosiveness. So, boom. You get popcorn flying off, little groups of it. So. Again. So. You can have it just one shot. That just happens once and you're done. So yeah, just mess around with the particles and see what you can do with it in your game. That's what I'm doing. I'll get back to my game and and that should do it. Whoop, swarming. Should be dead soon. So it's not like they're totally dive bombing into it, but they're definitely coming at it in the angles there should be. So that'll make it a lot tougher on higher levels. So I guess now we'll call it done. So not done. I have to do the shields and stuff like that to make it a little more interesting. And the HUD. So that'll be next. So now it should be. So catch you later.